The old museum's walls crumbled around Thomas as he carefully made his way through the ruins. 50 years of abandonment had left the building in bad shape, but he knew there were still treasures hidden inside. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing display cases covered in thick dust. The young archaeologist had spent 3 weeks searching these ruins. Most people thought he was wasting his time. After all, the important artifacts had been moved to the new museums in the Sky Cities years ago. But Thomas had always trusted his gut, and right now it was telling him there was something special here. He stepped into what used to be the ancient weapons exhibit. Glass crunched under his boots as he moved between the empty display cases. The beam of his flashlight caught something in the corner, a faint blue glow coming from behind a fallen column. "That's new," he muttered, carefully climbing over the broken stone. The glow got brighter as he got closer. His heart beat faster with each step. Behind the column, he found a hidden door in the floor. It was made of old metal, but strange symbols covered its surface. Symbols that definitely weren't human. Some of them were glowing with that mysterious blue light. Thomas pulled out his scanner and waved it over the door. "No radiation, no dangerous gases," he said to himself. He found the edge of the door and pulled. With a loud groan of metal, it opened. Inside was a small room. In the center, floating in midair, was a sword unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. The blade looked like it was made of crystal, but it was stronger than steel. Strange writing ran down its length, some in an alien language, some in ancient human writing. The sword hummed softly, making the air around it vibrate. "Incredible," Thomas whispered. He took pictures and readings with his scanner. The sword was giving off energy readings that his equipment could barely understand. As he studied the ancient writing on the blade, he began to make out parts of the story. It talked about a great queen from the stars who had come to Earth long ago. She had made friends with humans and shared her knowledge with them. But then something had gone wrong. There was talk of betrayal and a great sadness. The sound of footsteps echoing through the ruins made Thomas look up. Lights were moving in the darkness, coming his way. He heard voices and the sound of military boots. A group of people in government uniforms appeared in the doorway. Their leader, a tall woman with serious eyes, stepped forward. "Mr. Reed," she said, "I'm Agent Miller from the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. We've been monitoring your work here." She looked at the floating sword. "I see you found it." "Found what?" Thomas asked. "What's going on?" "That sword you've discovered. It's been searched for across the galaxy for centuries," she explained. "The Stellar Empire has been broadcasting messages about it on all frequencies. They want it back very badly." The Stellar Empire. Thomas couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You mean there really are aliens out there?" "Oh yes," Agent Miller nodded. "And thanks to your discovery, we're finally going to meet them properly." She handed him an official-looking document. "Congratulations, Mr. Reed. You're about to become part of humanity's first official diplomatic mission to the Empire. We leave in 3 days." Thomas looked back at the softly humming sword, his mind racing with questions. He had started this dig hoping to find interesting pieces of human history. Instead, he had found something that would change humanity's future forever. The sword continued to float, its crystal blade catching the light. In its ancient markings was a story waiting to be told, a story that connected Earth's past with the stars above. And Thomas knew he was now part of that story, whether he was ready or not. The space station at the edge of human territory was the biggest thing Thomas had ever seen. Through the ship's window, he watched it grow larger as they approached. Its silver arms stretched out like a giant metal flower opening in space. Next to him, Ambassador Anna Wells checked her tablet one more time. "Remember," she said, "let me do most of the talking. This is the first time humans have officially met the Stellar Empire. We can't make any mistakes." Thomas nodded, but his eyes kept going back to the strange sword floating in its special container. For 3 days, it had hummed nonstop, getting louder as they traveled deeper into space. Now it was almost singing. Their ship docked with a soft bump. Thomas followed Anna through the airlock and into the station. His heart nearly stopped when he saw what was waiting for them. The aliens of the Stellar Empire were beautiful and scary at the same time. They looked almost human in shape, but their skin was made of shifting metal that flowed like water. Crystals grew from their shoulders, and heads like jewelry. Their eyes glowed with the same blue light as the sword. The tallest alien stepped forward. Unlike the others who were silver, her metal skin was gold, and her crystal crown sparkled with rainbow colors. "I am Empress Dawnstar," she said in perfect English. Her voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a breeze. "Welcome to the edge of the Stellar Empire." Anna bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I am Ambassador Wells, and this is Thomas Reed, who found the artifact." The Empress's glowing eyes fixed on Thomas. "Show me," she whispered. With shaking hands, Thomas opened the container. The sword floated out, its crystal blade shining brighter than ever. All the aliens gasped. Some fell to their knees. "The Star Splitter," Dawnstar said softly. "After all these centuries." She reached out but stopped just short of touching it. "This blade belonged to my ancestor, Queen Morninglight. She came to Earth 5,000 years ago, when both our peoples were young." "What happened to her?" Thomas asked, forgetting he wasn't supposed to speak. The Empress's face grew sad. "She saw greatness in humanity. She made a secret alliance with your leaders, sharing knowledge and building trust. But others in the Empire feared humans would grow too powerful." Her metal skin rippled with emotion. "They tried to destroy all record of Earth. Morninglight disappeared, and with her, this sword, the symbol of her right to rule. And now it's found its way back to you," Anna said carefully. "Yes." Dawnstar looked at Thomas. "But why did she hide it on Earth? And why did it wait until now to be found?" She straightened up, her crystal crown catching the light. "You must come with us to the imperial capital. There are ceremonies that must be performed, and—" She paused. "I sense there is more to this story than we know." One of the other aliens stepped forward. "My queen, the humans cannot be trusted with." "Silence, Lord Nightblade," Dawnstar commanded. "They found and kept safe our most sacred treasure for 5,000 years. They have earned their place at our table." Thomas looked at the sword, still floating and humming its strange song. He realized this wasn't just about returning a lost artifact. This was about finishing something that started thousands of years ago, when another queen looked at humanity and saw something worth protecting. As they prepared to board the alien ship that would take them to the imperial capital, Thomas couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the sword was hiding, and why it had chosen now to be found. The alien ship moved through space faster than anything Thomas had ever seen. Stars stretched into lines of light outside the crystal windows. He sat in his room, watching the sword float in its container, still humming that strange tune. A soft chime filled the air. "May I enter?" Empress Dawnstar's musical voice asked through the speaker. "Yes, Your Majesty," Thomas replied, standing quickly. The door melted away like liquid metal, and the Empress glided in. Her golden skin caught the starlight, making her glow. "You've been studying the sword," she said. "I have. The writing on it." Thomas hesitated. "It's like it's telling a story, but parts are missing." Dawnstar moved closer to the sword. "The Star Splitter is more than just a weapon," she said. "It's a key to our oldest technologies and proof of the right to rule. Without it, many think I'm not a true empress." Her metal skin rippled with worry. "That's why Lord Nightblade and others watch us so closely." As if summoned by his name, Lord Nightblade appeared at the doorway. His silver skin was darker than the others, almost black. "My queen, we're approaching the gateway system. The nobles await news of the sword." The Empress straightened. "Tell them nothing yet. The sword must be tested properly first." Nightblade's eyes flashed. "Surely you don't need tests to prove what is obvious. Everything must be done correctly," Dawnstar said firmly. "These humans are our guests. They will be treated with respect." After Nightblade left, Thomas asked, "What kind of tests?" "The sword responds to the true royal bloodline," Dawnstar explained. "But more importantly, it contains memories, recordings of my ancestors' last days. If we can unlock them." The ship shuddered slightly. Through the window, Thomas saw a massive ring of metal and crystal floating in space. Energy crackled between its edges. "The gateway," Dawnstar said. "It will take us directly to the capital." Ambassador Anna joined them as the ship approached the ring. "Your Majesty," she said, "my government wants to know about establishing regular contact between our peoples." "First, we must secure my position," the Empress replied. "There are those who think humans should be kept away from our empire. They fear you, just as they feared you 5,000 years ago." The ship passed through the gateway. Thomas's stomach turned as space itself seemed to bend. When his vision cleared, he saw a sight that took his breath away. A huge planet filled the view, covered in towers of crystal and living metal. Ships of all sizes moved around it like fish in a sea of stars. The capital of the stellar empire was more beautiful than any human city he had ever seen. But he also saw warships, lots of them, their weapons glowing with power. "The noble houses brought their fleets," Dawnstar said quietly. "They're waiting to see what happens with the sword." "What if the tests don't work?" Thomas asked. "Then there will be war," she answered simply. "Some houses want any excuse to seize power. Lord Nightblade has been gathering allies for years." The sword's humming grew louder as they descended toward the planet. Thomas noticed it was glowing brighter too, almost pulsing in time with the planet's own crystal towers. "It recognizes its home," Dawnstar whispered. "But why do I feel it's trying to warn us of something?" As their ship landed at the royal palace, Thomas saw hundreds of aliens gathering to watch. Their metal skin shimmered in many colors, and their crystal decorations sparkled. But he also saw how they divided themselves into groups, each watching the others with suspicious eyes. They weren't just here to return a sword anymore. They were walking into the middle of a power struggle that had been building for centuries. And somehow, this human archaeologist and his ambassador friend had become important pieces in a game they barely understood. The Imperial Palace was like something from a dream. Towers of living crystal reached up into the purple sky, their surfaces changing color with each passing cloud. Thomas walked beside Ambassador Anna, trying not to stare at everything at once. Guards with metal skin in rainbow colors lined the halls. Their crystal armor grew right out of their bodies, sharp and dangerous. They all watched the floating sword as Thomas passed, their glowing eyes full of wonder and fear. In the great hall, hundreds of noble aliens waited. They stood in groups, their metal skin showing their family colors. Thomas saw gold like the Empress, deep blue, bright green, and Lord Nightblade's group in their threatening black. "The human brings the star splitter," a voice announced. The whole room went quiet. Empress Dawnstar sat on a throne made of flowing metal and growing crystal. "Come forward," she commanded. Thomas stepped up to the throne, the sword floating beside him in its container. He could feel everyone watching him, judging every move. "The sword must be tested," Lord Nightblade called out. "How do we know this is the real star splitter?" "The testing chamber is ready, my queen," said a small alien with silver-blue skin. He looked older than the others, with crystals that had grown long and beard-like from his chin. "Master Smith," Dawnstar nodded to him. "Proceed." The old alien opened a door in the floor. A pillar of light rose up, and in it was a small platform. "Place the sword there," he said to Thomas. With shaking hands, Thomas opened the container. The sword floated out, now glowing brighter than ever. Thomas sat in the palace library, surrounded by floating screens filled with ancient alien writing. The sword hovered nearby, its gentle hum now familiar after so many hours of study. Red emergency lights flashed through the palace corridors as Thomas ran beside Empress Dawnstar. The sword floated between them, its blue glow fighting against the red warning lights. Behind them, Ambassador Anna and Master Smith hurried to keep up. They reached the throne room just as Lord Nightblade burst in through another door. His group of black-skinned nobles had grown larger, and they all carried weapons made of dark crystal. "The time for tests and ceremonies is over," Nightblade announced. Through the huge windows behind him, Thomas could see warships moving into position around the palace. "Surrender the sword, and we might let the humans live." "You fool," Dawnstar's voice rang out. "You're proving why Morning Light hid the sword in the first place." Morning Light was weak, Nightblade spat. She thought humans could be our equals. "Look at them. They're primitive, barely able to reach the stars." Thomas stepped forward, the sword moving with him. "But we learned. We grew." That's exactly what Morning Light knew would happen. The sword's humming suddenly changed. It rose higher and higher until everyone had to cover their ears. Blue light burst from its blade, forming a giant image in the air. A face appeared, an alien queen with silver skin and kind eyes. Everyone gasped. "Morning Light," Dawnstar whispered. The image spoke. "If you're seeing this, then humans and the Empire have finally met again. And if you're seeing this in the throne room," she smiled sadly, "then someone is trying to use my sword to start a war." "Listen carefully," the ancient queen continued. "The Star Splitter isn't just a weapon or a symbol. It's a key to something I built into the very heart of our capital. Something to protect both our peoples until they were ready to trust each other." The floor began to shake. Outside, the crystal towers of the city started glowing with the same blue light as the sword. "Stop this!" Nightblade shouted. He raised his weapon, but Dawnstar was faster. The Empress grabbed the floating sword. This time, when her hand touched it, the blade blazed with light. The crystals in her crown glowed in response. "The royal blood recognizes its own," Master Smith said proudly. More images filled the air, plans and diagrams showing vast machinery hidden beneath the city. Thomas recognized the symbols from his studies. "It's a defense system," he said excitedly, "but it needs both human and Empire technology to work. That's why the sword was hidden on Earth. It absorbed human knowledge while it waited." Nightblade laughed. "You expect us to believe that? Fire on the palace," he commanded into a communicator. The warships outside turned their weapons toward the throne room. But before they could fire, Dawnstar lifted the sword high. "Thomas," she called. "Morning Light's message. We must complete the circuit. Take hold of the sword with me." Thomas didn't hesitate. He grabbed the sword's handle next to Dawnstar's golden hand. The humming grew into a roar. Blue light exploded outward from the sword, racing through the city's towers. A shield of pure energy spread across the sky, covering the entire capital. The warship's weapons fired but couldn't break through. "Don't you see?" Dawnstar's voice echoed through the throne room. "This is what Morning Light wanted. Humans and the Empire working together, protecting each other." Nightblade's followers began backing away as more palace guards rushed in. Their leader looked around wildly, realizing he had lost. "Arrest them," Dawnstar commanded. As guards moved to obey, she turned to Thomas, still holding the sword together. "Thank you for helping me understand my ancestors' wisdom." The sword's light began to fade, but its humming stayed strong, a constant reminder that humans and the Empire were now linked forever, just as Morning Light had planned so long ago. A week after the failed uprising, Thomas stood at a window in the palace, watching ships move peacefully through the purple sky. The city's crystal towers still glowed faintly blue, powered by the defense system he and Dawnstar had activated together. The door melted away behind him, and Ambassador Anna walked in. "The last of Nightblade's supporters have surrendered," she said. "Their warships are standing down. And Nightblade himself, under guard in the palace prison. His metal skin has turned gray. They say that happens when they lose their noble status." Thomas nodded, then looked at the sword floating beside him. Its hum had grown quieter since the battle, but it never completely stopped. "Have you read the latest translations?" he asked. "About the other hidden technologies?" Anna smiled. Morning light left quite a few surprises for us to find together. The door melted again, and Empress Dawnstar entered with Master Smith. Her golden skin shone brighter than ever, and her crystal crown had grown new patterns that looked almost like stars. "The noble houses have made their decision," she announced. "They've accepted the truth about Morning Light's plan. The Empire will officially recognize humanity as equals." Master Smith's crystal beard tinkled as he nodded. "The old records are clear now. Morning Light saw that both our peoples needed time to grow, to learn from each other's strengths. The sword waited on Earth, gathering human knowledge while we developed our living metal and crystal technology. And now we can share everything," Dawnstar said. "Morning Light hid more than just defense systems. There are plans for ships that can cross the galaxy in days, cures for diseases that plague both our peoples, ways to restore dead worlds to life." Thomas watched the sword float lazily in the air. She trusted that we'd be ready someday, that we'd choose to work together instead of fighting. "Which is why," Dawnstar smiled, "I want you to be my first human advisor. You understand both our peoples, and you helped fulfill my ancestors' dream." Thomas looked at Anna in surprise. She grinned. "Say yes. I need someone to help me set up the new human embassy here." Before Thomas could answer, the sword suddenly glowed brighter. New symbols appeared around its blade, floating in the air like tiny stars. "One last message," Master Smith said, reading the ancient script. "Morning Light's final words to us." The symbols formed into words everyone could read. "To those who united our peoples, this is not an ending, but a beginning. The galaxy holds wonders and dangers neither of us could face alone. Together, we can reach the stars themselves." Dawnstar touched the sword gently. "Then let's honor her wisdom. The humans will help us unlock the old technologies, and we'll help them reach new worlds. The Star Splitter will stand as proof of our alliance." "And if anyone threatens that alliance?" Anna asked. The Empress smiled. "Then they'll face both our peoples together. That's what Morning Light wanted all along. Not just peace between us, but a shared future among the stars." Thomas looked out at the city again. Human ships were arriving now, their simple metal designs mixing with the Empire's crystal vessels. On the ground, he could see humans and aliens walking together, sharing stories and knowledge just as Morning Light had dreamed. "Yes," he said finally, "I'll be your advisor. There's still so much we can learn from each other." The sword's hum changed to a happy tone, almost like it was singing. Its work was done. The ancient queen's plan had worked. Humans and the Empire would face the future together, ready to discover whatever wonders waited in the galaxy's endless night. Master Smith touched the sword one last time. "Not just a weapon, not just a symbol," he said softly. "A bridge between worlds, built by a queen who saw hope in our differences and strength in our unity." Outside, the twin suns of the Empire's capital world set together, painting the sky in colors no human had ever seen before. It was the dawn of a new age, just as Morning Light had planned so many thousand years ago.